Good afternoon and welcome to this special commission business meeting. This meeting was noticed on December 15th at 10:15 a.m. Purpose of this meeting is to consider docket number 2005-83A, Public Service Commission of South Carolina Administrative and Procedural Matters, and to conduct public interviews of the prospective contractors who responded to the request for proposal issued pursuant to Commission Order Number 2020-789 and solicitation number 5400020652. Before we begin, we'll take a roll call of the commissioners. District 1,
Commissioner Williams is participating virtually.
District 3,
Caston present virtually.
District 4,
Irvin present virtually.
District 5,
Thomas is present virtually.
District 6,
District 6 is present telephonically.
District 7,
Present in the hearing room.
and I am Commissioner Belser from District 2. I will ask Ms. Boyd if she will, do you have anything to say?
No, ma'am, Madam Chairman, Madam Vice Chair, other than to let you know that the two entities who submitted bids are available virtually, and those entities include JPC, representatives from JPC Advisory LLC, and a representative from the National Regulatory Research Institute. So they are available for you to conduct this virtual interview.
Thank you, Ms. Boyd. To the folks from JPC Advisory and from NRRI, we appreciate you submitting proposals in response to this solicitation. If I could take appearances, who is on the call from JPC Advisory LLC?
My name is Jim Carney, and I am from JPC Advisory, LLC.
Anyone else?
Rhonda Boggs,
Okay.
also JPC Advisory.
Anyone else?
And Dave Johnson.
Okay.
Dave Johnson, JPC Advisory.
All right, thank you very much. And who is on the call from NRRI?
Carl Peckman, Director of NRRI.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Peckman. I do want to just make a couple of brief remarks. Some of the information contained in the responses is considered proprietary until the award is offered. So I need for you not to discuss pricing, any pricing that you had in your proposals, but we would like to hear a discussion of qualifications and the agenda that you would propose. And I think, Ms. Boyd, any other cautionary remarks that I need to give? So please, in your responses or in questions from the commissioners, please do not reference any pricing. Let's see, we had JPC. Is there any opening or any preliminary remarks you'd like to make?
Only that we appreciate this opportunity to present ourselves for consideration, to provide a seminar in regulatory utility finance concepts, and hopefully you will find that our extensive background in working in the utility sector from both the perspective of the utility itself and from the financial services side of the market, basically those that provide capital funding and financial advisory services to a utility company. So that concludes the opening remark.
Thank you, Mr. Carney. From NRRI, any preliminary remarks?
Yes, thank you. We appreciate the opportunity to be here. As you know, we are the research arm of the nation's public utility commissions, and our job is to serve you all, and we look forward to the opportunity of doing so with respect to teaching the finance course at the end of the month. We essentially do three things at NRI. We do broad research, we do targeted assistance for regulatory commissions and training, and certainly this falls well within our practice and our experience. And I look forward to answering your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Peckman. I will now entertain, are there any commissioners who would like to ask questions of either or both of the entities that responded? Mr. Commissioner Powers, I see your light on.
Sorry.
Okay. Anyone else?
Madam Vice Chair?
Madam Vice Chair, when
Okay, I think I
would
heard
like
Commissioner Irvin first.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. I appreciate both parties being available today to discuss their qualifications, background, and experience in commission training. Let me address my first question to NRRI. Could you tell us how many state regulatory commissions you have worked with in training, specifically on the issue that was sent out for the South Carolina Commission later this year?
Let me answer that in two ways. In the past, we've done training programs for regulatory commissions where we've gone to the commissions and trained on broad aspects of regulation. We've done essentially a 3 or 4 day on-site course. I think we've done that and remember, I've been with NRI for 2 years now, approximately. So we've done that in the past number of years, 3 or 4 years, for about 5 or 6 commissions. But also, with respect to training, we have what we call the Regulatory Training Initiative. And we have been working to prepare a course on accounting and finance with the Neighborhood Accounting and Finance group subcommittee, and that course will be offered at the end of January and beginning of February, and will be open to all commissions. So there's 2 answers: one, what we've done in the past, and the other is what we're currently doing going forward.
Thank you, Mr. Peckman. And is it also my understanding that you have a research arm where not only do you train, but you also do independent research on behalf of state regulatory, for state regulatory commissions? Is that true?
That's correct. As I indicated, the 3 areas that we work in are research, directed assistance, and training. So we do research. That research comes out in the form of papers. Today we held a webinar on some of the research. We have a paper coming out, for example, on low-income solar programs today, and there'll be another paper coming out next week on the changing role of market structure at the FERC. So we do extensive research, yes.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. And let me follow up and give the other party a chance to respond. Tell us what training you've done for state public service commissions, please, sir.
Yeah. Thank you, sir. Being a relatively new firm, actually constituted about 8 years ago, but only recently becoming very active in pursuing opportunities. We have not done a seminar for regulatory or a training session for commissions in the past. Our experience in that area in terms of teaching regulatory concepts and principles have been principally at universities, teaching courses in finance, corporate finance specifically, and one of the focuses of that with the students has been to have them go through the process of developing testimony on various financial issues, presenting that testimony, rebutting the teams. We put the students into teams, and doing that in front of members of the Virginia State Corporation Commission. So in terms of formal educational seminars of this nature, this would be our first of those.
Thank you, sir. Madam Vice Chair, those are the only questions I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Irvin. I believe I heard Commissioner Caston speak up.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Madam Chair, Vice Chair. I guess this would be for both firms, and I too thank you both for not only soliciting, but taking time to present yourselves and answer questions. I guess you could keep the same order if you wish. In your opinion, what one or two things are the most important for a commissioner to understand in a rate case? Not a trick question, it's a question I really have.
No, I think that's a very, very important question. Well, I break up a rate case. Let me hone in on the answer to that question in terms of finance by going broad first and then bringing it down. In a rate case, there are essentially three tasks that a commission needs to deal with in terms of making rates. The first is to determine the revenue requirement. The second is to do a cost of service study that allocates that revenue requirement to different customer classes. And then the third is to design rates. What we're talking about here in terms of finance is a piece of the first part, which is determining the revenue requirement, the amount of the rates, the revenues that the utility is allowed to charge for providing service. With respect to finance in particular, what I think that the commission needs to understand is a couple of things. The first is that there are many ways to determine what an appropriate rate of return is, and the two components being debt and equity. And they need to understand what the alternatives are with respect to that. But the other thing is that the commission's actions themselves will also affect that cost of capital. And so the commission needs to be cognizant about how they create incentives that will enable the utility to better pursue its line of business, to be successful with respect to its line of business, and that it's very important to recognize that the whole ratings process is critical to what the costs are. Now, that's not to say that the ratings process should determine what the utility's commission's actions are, but I think that in the context of designing rates, it's important to think about, well, we operate within this milieu where there are other actors. How does our decisions affect those other actors, and what's the feedback with respect to affecting the cost of our customers? So there are a variety of different types of incentive regulations and things of that sort that will then affect that feedback loop in terms of how the regulatory actions affect the cost to customers.
Mr. Carney, before you answer that question, let me have a follow-up question to Mr. Pittman, and you can answer both too if you don't mind. What, I guess, relative to NRI's proposal, what in your proposal would respond pretty much to what you just told me?
Well, I think that the third session on the factors affecting the cost of money would affect that. The first is on utility ratings, to get an understanding of the prudence disallowance, the issues of decoupling, formula rate making, and by formula rate making, we're really looking at incentive-based rate making, how that in fact in turn affects the cost of money to the utility. So I think the first two sessions are really focused on, you know, some of the fundamentals of what finance is and how it plays into the whole regulatory environment. That session talks about the impact back on the utility of the Commission's decisions. And then the final really goes into the methods that the Commission and staff will be seeing with respect to the calculations of the cost of money that you'll be seeing in rate cases.
Thank you very much. Mr. Carney,
My
do I
pleasure.
need to repeat those?
No, sir.
I'm sorry.
I think I recall. That's quite all right. In terms of the most important aspects, I certainly concur with Mr. Peckman, everything that he mentioned, and the broad level of three sort of very broad topics I would also agree with. Focusing then on the first one, as Mr. Peckman had delineated it, I would say that I think it's imperative for the Commission to have an understanding of the methods that witnesses will use and that will be presented to them in terms of determining the overall cost of capital that will be employed by the regulated utilities that are going to be coming in front of them. So I think a little more of a deep dive into some of the pros and cons of the various methods that you will see, I think is extremely important for the Commission to have been exposed to, so that in a sense you can separate the wheat from the chaff. I think there are often distortions of a lot of the concepts that are done in an advocacy position, and I think the more involved the Commission is with the understanding of those principal concepts, the better they will be to discern what really is essential and what is not. Going beyond that, I think the other thing that's extremely important is for the Commission to have an understanding and appreciation for the capital raising process that these firms will be going through. I think they have to have a basic understanding of the differences in the expectations and the issues that are faced by the debt investors in the capital markets, the equity investors, the bank market. It's different from those other two markets. And I think it's imperative for the Commission to have a sense, a deeper sense of what are the real drivers? What are the means by which this capital is raised? What are the pros and cons? Are there opportunities that perhaps are not being fully exploited either by the utility in terms of its access to the markets or because of restrictions perhaps that the Commission is placing on them? And along with that, not only the traditional financial instruments, but I think a lot of utilities now, particularly as we move into the era of renewable finance, are going to be looking at alternative financing structures. Perhaps more structured finance than corporate finance will be the mode going forward. Along with that, I think all utilities, not just of late, but for a number of years now, have had more and more awareness of products that are available to help mitigate risk. So I think a bit of an understanding beyond just a superficial view of the derivatives market, how utilities use them to manage the risks that they're exposed to, is also something that's very important for the Commission to have a detailed, somewhat detailed understanding of, more so than just a superficial understanding of definitions and so on. So I tend to agree. I think we perhaps view it as maybe a little more depth would be in order than what perhaps is traditionally available to the Commission. And if I may, I would also ask my colleagues if they would like to add anything to that.
This is Rhonda Boggs. I would just piggyback on what you mentioned about structured finance. I think these days it is imperative to recognize that that's the type of financing vehicle that is going to be a commonplace and need to be used more often than what you might normally have seen under the old rate making. And it really bridges into that rate design issue, because you'll have special rates designed for special, renewable projects in particular are taking advantage of this. And they're having to move out of the normal financing into these special structured financing vehicles in order to bring value not just to the utilities customers, but to the project developers as well.
This is Dave Johnson with JPC. I was on the banking side for many years, and when I think about utility finance, anytime we talk to utility, the primary driver was access to the capital markets, and access not only in terms of size and different markets, but also pricing. And the second conversation after that would all be about relationships and the perception of the company in the capital market. So all companies have obviously public ratings. They have perceptions and credibility, or lack thereof, in the capital markets. They also have a perception with the bank market. So we would not only underwrite for the bank's balance sheet, but we would underwrite for successful capital markets transactions. And the number one thing that we would look at would be the relationships and the history that the company has with the banks and the capital markets, but also the relationship that the utility has with its utility commission. Has it been a productive relationship? Has it been acrimonious? Has it been stable? Has it been productive, not in the sense that the commission gets everything that they want or the utility gets everything they want, but do they reach common ground on complex issues, and has there been a history of working together? And what I mean by that, no surprises. The worst thing that could happen in underwriting a utility in terms of either bank or the capital markets is that they have an acrimonious relationship with the utility commission for whatever reason. Could be their fault, could be the commission has changed or has made some different decisions. But is that a healthy relationship? And that's the number one thing that we would look at, is the perception, the access, the valuation, and the evaluation of those relationships that the utility has to ensure a successful execution. And to Jim and Rhonda's point, it's becoming more and more critical with financing vehicles that are becoming more and more complex, project finance, non-recourse, off-balance sheet. That perception and then underwriting becomes more difficult, and hence those relationships become even more important to evaluate.
With respect to the second part, or second question, the items I think in the proposed agenda that are on point with what we have just discussed would be item 2, the concept of fair rate of return, specifically numeral 2 under that, estimating the fair market rate of return, where we would anticipate doing a review of the major methodologies, highlighting both their strengths and their weaknesses, as well as item 3, concept of capital structure, how a utility finances its assets. The agenda envisions going through the various types of securities that have been traditionally used, as well as some of the newer and evolutionary securities. And then finally, item 5, which is the evolutionary concepts in utility use of financing vehicles. We would anticipate talking about some of the evolving and emerging structural financing alternatives. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you all.
Commissioner Caston, anything else?
No, Madam Vice Chair, thank you.
Thank you. Any other commissioners?
Madam Vice Chair?
Commissioner Williams?
Thank you.
thank you to all of you for offering, especially on the short notice. And I think you can probably read between the lines and know that you have a number of brand new commissioners, and you have other commissioners that have only been on the job for a couple of years. So this is a great opportunity for us. We have a lot of different backgrounds. And so my question to each of the groups is really, in whatever way you want to talk about this, how convince me that as somebody who does not have a finance background, that I'm going to come out feeling like I am well prepared. And I want to suggest that you might look over your scope and talk about it from that perspective. I'm used to working with RFPs and responses and giving people a chance to talk a little bit more about what it is that excites you about what you've offered. So I want to also kind of open the door to each of the groups to kind of talk a little bit more about the components of what you're proposing, but also if you'd answer that from the perspective of connecting with folks without a finance background, I'd appreciate it. And why don't we start with the JPC, Ms. Boggs, Mr. Johnson, Mr. Carney.
Okay, thank you. I have connected with a lot of folks with no finance background for the last 8 years or so in finance classes. I've taught classes from principles or foundations through advanced topics. And I think that, there's two ways to approach the discourse on these topics. One is very technical, and the other is more of a concept-oriented, but filled with practical applications and practical examples. And I think for the non-finance major, no one wants to sit and see a bunch of equations. Even finance people don't really want to sit and see a lot of equations thrown at them from time to time. But, for the non-finance major, I think the essential thing is to distill the topics down to the very nexus of what they represent. And I think, to your point about what we believe might give us the ability to do so, again, I'd rely on the fact that we've all been involved in teaching to students who, again, come in with no finance background and over the course of 3 or 4 years do develop some levels of sophistication. The topics that we have chosen in terms of the overall scope, I think, are those that you hear a lot about. Either you hear about them when people are in front of you in regulatory proceedings, or you read about them in the newspapers. Things like MLPs and yield codes and REITs and all of these sorts of structures that are being used more and more in the energy business, if not by the utilities, then potentially by those folks from whom the utility will be procuring their power. Each are incumbent and attendant with their own risks and returns. And I think it's imperative for the commission and the commissioners to understand the motivations of those that are providing power, particularly as we move towards a greater reliance on renewables and probably greater reliance by the utilities to procure that from third parties, that understanding of a broad range of these topics becomes imperative. Hedging power prices in power pools and hedging through nodes versus hubs. And it sounds very sophisticated, but I think it can be boiled down to pretty simple concepts and language, and I hope that we have the ability to do so. And again, I'll ask my colleagues to chime in on those comments.
Jim and Rhonda are both educators as well as myself. I'm teaching at Queen's University in Charlotte, and it's been an absolute joy to teach undergraduates. I teach a senior capstone course to environmental science students that are way smarter than me in environmental science, but it's a strategy course. And what I found most effective in bridging the gap, where we come from two different worlds, they're coming from the science world, I'm coming from the business world, and each has its own jargon, is to use case studies. And so, like Jim indicated, I think you get the concepts sort of out there as a framework, and then you dive into case studies and see the practical application of finance. So a non-finance person or non-business person or non-science person can grasp and remember, what went right with certain case studies, what went wrong. And the three of us at JPC, we each have 30 years of experience, Jim and Rhonda out of utility, and me in the banking world. So we have lots of case studies. We've seen a lot of cycles. We've seen a lot of mistakes. We've seen a lot of good things. And we would love to share those with you. I think you'd find our teaching and our instruction to be interspersed with a lot of storytelling and with a lot of case studies. And I've found that particularly useful at the undergraduate level to use case studies to reinforce learning.
Thank you.
I'm just, are you all,
Yes.
JPC, you all, okay,
yes.
thank you. Well, I've enjoyed listening to your presentation, and I think we have a little bit of a difference. I'm a regulator. I'm not a utility person. I'm not a banker. I've been a regulator since late 1970s. And there's a way that regulators think. And there's a way that regulators evaluate things. And there's a certain kind of responsibility that regulators have. I have no doubt that when it comes to the details of cost of capital, the nuts and bolts, that either of the three of you will blow me right away. But we're talking about an introductory course that's 4 hours long for regulatory commissions to give them an appreciation of what regulation is about, and in particular, the role that finance plays in the regulatory process. And as regulators who have as one of their core functions the training of public utility commissions, that's what we do. We train public utility commissions to think about how to regulate. And in this particular case, what we will do is to work to think about how to regulate one aspect of the revenue requirement, the financial aspect of the revenue requirement. And looking over my outline, I do think that there was one aspect that should have been in the outline that wasn't, and we would also be talking and introducing the concept of securitization. That should have been in the outline that I had presented. I think that's a very important topic. And I think that I agree with you, having a better appreciation about how renewables finance is critical. But in a 4-hour course, which is what we're proposing to do, we need to present something that provides a concept of how we think about finance. And that's what we're going to do. At the end of the course, you'll have an appreciation for the role of finance, for the kinds of questions that you're going to have before you, for the effect of what you're doing will be on the cost of money. The relationship that was discussed, that's all very much encapsulated in the credit ratings that utilities have. So from my perspective, I think that, you have two very interesting choices before you. Our choice is, how do you think about finance from the standpoint of a regulator? And that's what we do. We're regulators, and I think that at the end of our course, you'll have a better appreciation that you did at the beginning of the course, and that's what we have to offer, and that's what we'll deliver on. So you know, I think it's important to have a sense of the role of finance, the importance of finance, the implications, and then you're going to have lots and lots of time and experience digging into the details of finance through the rest of your regulatory careers. Thank you.
Thank you both. Commissioner Williams, any other questions?
Yes. Mr. Peckman, would you respond a little bit to how you will teach? And if the other team wants to add any more to it, that would be wonderful. But the other team kind of talked about storytelling and getting to the nexus and case studies. But I wanted to give you, Mr. Peckman, a chance to talk about how that teaching will happen.
Certainly, what we've proposed are 4 sessions, essentially 45 minutes of lecture plus 15 minutes of discussion, break discussion. You know, we'll move it along that way. Of course, we're going to be telling stories. We're going to be discussing how different events have occurred, what's happened. You know, why is it that we have decoupling, you know, as a financial mechanism for energy efficiency and things of that sort. So and I will present the course because in a short course like this, it makes sense to not shift for the instructor to be able to start a dialogue with the students. At least that's our perspective with respect to how we've designed this. So yes, we're going to be using examples. We're going to be telling stories. Not too many stories. We only have 4 hours, right? You know, there's only so much time. You know, and for those who know me, know that I love telling stories. So we'll tell stories. You know, we'll engage. We'll talk. We'll find out your questions. We'll try to answer your questions. If we need more information, we'll present that to you afterwards. We'll follow up. You know, you're our member. You know, we're here to serve you. So this is what we'll have tales with you. You know, whether we teach this course or not, any question that you have, that's our job. Is if we don't know the answer directly, is to find the answer out for you. So.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
Anything else, Commissioner Williams?
No, but thank you very much.
Any other commissioner questions?
This is Chairman Williams. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Please go ahead, Chairman Williams.
This question is for both parties. What type of materials will you provide with your training?
We will.
Who's going?
We've been going through and finding out publicly available information with respect to cost of capital. The Pennsylvania Commission, for example, put together a training manual on regulatory concepts that we've been given permission to use. We'll excise those sections out to the extent that there are articles so we can share. We'll share those. We don't have those materials together yet. We'll be putting them together if we are engaged to teach the course. And of course, there'll be slides. Jim?
Okay. Mr. Peckman, does that conclude your response?
Yes, that's why I was trying to turn it over to Jim.
Okay.
So,
JPC?
yeah.
Thank you, Carl. Appreciate it. We will also, of course, be utilizing slides. You can't do a presentation without a PowerPoint, right? It's just not allowed. We would also envision using articles out of newspapers, Wall Street Journal, Forbes magazine, things that are in the, how do I want to say it, the common reading material of people that have an interest in finance, to find those sorts of examples of these financial concepts at work. It's something I require my introductory students in finance to do every week. And they don't like it, but they come to enjoy it. So I'm gonna borrow from that. But using, as I said, popular sorts of sources of information, along with, we also would envision, we have not yet procured the permission to do so, but I have done it in the past with classes, permission to use another, if you will, handbook or training manual on a lot of financial concepts related to rate of return and rate base. Excuse me. But I wouldn't foresee any problem, as we have easily attained that in the past. So slide decks, certainly articles, relevant articles from current and more mainstream popular sorts of publications, as well as potentially even a published article or two from, an industry-oriented type of publication.
Thank you, Mr. Carney. Chairman Williams, anything else?
No, that answers my question. Thank you.
Any other commissioners? Mr. Carney, Ms. Boggs, Mr. Johnson, and Mr. Peckman, I'd like to thank y'all again for being available to discuss your proposals with us this afternoon. And just appreciate y'all responding to the solicitation. I would note that we do have scheduled for tomorrow at 11 a.m. A special business meeting where we will discuss this docket again and the potential award of this solicitation. And that will be Thursday, December 17th at 11:30 a.m. Thank you very much. Hope y'all have a good afternoon. And again, thank you. This meeting is now.
Thank you. Have a wonderful holiday.
Thank you, y'all too. This meeting is now adjourned.